Hey everyone, hope that you're all doing well today. So as you can tell by the title of today's video, we're going to be talking about Xin Zhao once again. A couple of weeks ago, I had did a video for a general rundown of the potential mini rework for Xin Zhao's kit, and we were expecting it to drop sometime around mid-April to the end of April, but as far as 11.6 is concerned, we got it as soon as the beginning of March. So I went ahead and I decided to test all three of Xin Zhao's potential build paths, since Xin Zhao is now potentially structured around General Bruiser, Crit, as well as AP Xin Zhao. And so we're going to cover all three of those today. Now, before I get into the three different build paths and experiences that I had with Xin Zhao, I want to take a look at where Xin Zhao sits right now since his mini rework. So at his highest win percentage, he's sitting at a 50.46 win rate. Basically even wins to losses. If you pick Xin Zhao in the jungle, playing him is essentially going to end up in a coin flip as to whether or not you're going to have a win or a loss. Now, that being said, what the highest win rate build path sits at is AD Bruiser / Fighter, which is Eclipse into Bork, as well as the standard Sterix Gauge and Death Stance, and rounding it off with a Guardian Angel. So where Xin sits right now in terms of the best way to play him is AD Bruiser in the jungle. Now, with that having been said, I want to jump into the first game that I played with Xin, which is the AD Bruiser build. Now, I wanted to focus on a more traditional build for Bruisers and Fighters, so I decided to go Trinity Force with Merc Treads, Blade of the Ruin King, Sterix Gauge, and rounding it off with a Spirit Visage, because that's where we got to that point in the game. Now, due to macro reasons, we ended up losing this game, but I just want to use this as a sample size to describe how I felt Xin Zhao acted or performed in this game, I guess you could say. And so with this general build path, I felt as though his sustain was, generally speaking, okay. As a fighter style champion, he still feels pretty lackluster, although I will say the W to E change is nice. Now, as far as clear speed and clear sustain is concerned, that was pretty healthy. I didn't feel as though I was losing too much HP, and the way his passive works, I felt as though recovery was really nice. Now, the thing that's interesting is that I felt as though for some reason, and I have no idea as to why, but sticking with the general max order of W first, then E, then Q, for some reason I felt like I had the slowest clear speed. I'm not exactly sure why, but between Bruiser, Crit, and AP, the Bruiser build felt like it took longer to clear the jungle than Crit and AP. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but as far as like healthy clears are concerned, it was definitely keeping him around 75 to 90% HP. But then in terms of him clearing the jungle itself, this build seemed to be the least effective in clearing the jungle. Again, I'm not exactly sure why that is, but for some reason it just felt that way. Now, when it came to fighting champions and team fighting, it felt pretty kind of okay. Like, Bruisers are in a weird spot right now because their items just have lost so much damage combined with their own nerfs. So AD Xin Zhao, while it is the standard, it felt like a lot of other Bruiser champions that just don't have damage right now. So fighting, if it was in a team fight situation, it felt okay, felt pretty standard bruisery, but if I was up against the Hecarim in this case that I was against, like, it just didn't feel like it had as much power as stat-wise on paper Riot may have put into it. So for the Bruiser side of things, it felt pretty normal for what a Bruiser champion would experience, basically. Now, jumping over to the Crit build for Xin Zhao, this one did take a little while to get going because obviously you have to build Crit items since Crit runes don't exist anymore. Now, in terms of clear speed, this one felt like it was actually the fastest. It had an edge over AP simply because it was so auto-attack reliant, and as Xin got more and more crit items, obviously he would have more critical strikes in his auto-attacks. So I feel as though in terms of clear speed, it was still just as healthy as the Bruiser and AP. However, in terms of clear speed, Crit Xin Zhao seems like it went the fastest. Now, in terms of how this game went, every other lane and role stomped, so we ended up finishing the game by 25 minutes. But there was enough in here in terms of team fighting as well as 1v1ing that I felt like I got a good enough sample size to examine this. So, compared Crit Xin Zhao to the other roles, Crit Xin Zhao seems to definitely have more damage than Bruiser Xin Zhao, but it doesn't pack as much as a punch as you'd think a crit auto attack build would do. Now, granted, a champion like Tryndamere definitely has higher modifiers than Xin Zhao does, and I went Kraken Slayer for as hard hitting of a crit build that I could do. I also focused on attack speed by going Berserker's Greaves and Phantom Dancers, so there was no cooldown reduction. But the thing that was nice about this too is that when it came to the squishier targets, they definitely did take a lot more damage. The only thing that I really noticed, and I'll get to this at the end of the video, is Crit's ability, or not Crit, Xin Zhao's ability to stick to targets, basically. So when you engage and then you have your W, once your knockup's done, it's really easy for them to run away, or in the case of getting hit with Ari charms in this game, if you do your full combo and then she hits you with a charm, she can just walk away. So in Xin's case, it also feels like he's lacking something in terms of sticking power to champions. So with that being said, let's jump over to the AP side of things. Now, flipping over to AP Xin Zhao, I have to say, while the AP scalings in his kit are definitely interesting, this is probably the most anticlimactic thing in terms of expecting a champion rework to cause build diversity to happen to somebody. And so, based off of how his AP stats go, I stuck with the max order of WEQ, simply because of how much more damage his W does anyway. But then, this is something that's meant to be hyper late game. Now, when you look at the 110% scaling on his ultimate, first of all, that number compared to other AP champions is definitely high, but when you realize that the base damage at all 3 levels is lower than every other AP champion, on top of the fact that it also includes a bonus AD scaling, it definitely takes away a lot of the damage that other AP champions have. Now, granted, he is a bruiser with AP scalings, but if you're going to go the AP route, the problem therein lies of the fact that it relies off of a small amount of base damage, plus only 110% of his ability power, because you don't have any bonus damage from your bonus AD factored in there. It doesn't add to the modifier at all. Now, in terms of clear, this is the second fastest, still relatively healthy. And then in terms of combat in 1v1 as well as team fight is absolutely atrocious. As far as the 1v1 is concerned, it felt almost on par with the Bruiser. I would say this one is definitely the worst in terms of the 1v1. Now, I didn't experiment with any hybrid builds because I wanted to go the 3 main build paths, basically. But what I focused on building here was I went Liandry's into Boots of Lucidity and then Lichbane. We ended up losing the game after this, but I was going to go into Gnasher's Tooth next. Now, because he is a combination of ability and auto-attack reliant, I wanted the cooldown in there. I didn't worry too much about attack speed, simply because when he engages and goes for his Q, the extra attack speed is nice, but I was playing with Comet and Runes, so, you know, full AP I'm trying to play based off of abilities and AP scaling versus auto-attacks. So the auto-attacks in that case are definitely supplementary. So with that being said, if I were to rank these, I would say in terms of fun and the most damage, I would say Crit definitely sits at number 1. Number 2 would be Standard Bruiser, although the way Riot is handling Bruiser items, they're definitely missing a lot of damage that they had before, so that takes away a lot of the fun there. And then number 3, obviously AP Xin Zhao being as anticlimactic as it is, because even though those high scalings are in there on his WE and Ultimate, they are very deceiving, and I found it very hard to do damage early and mid-game. So essentially, he's just a walking, you know, barrier for himself with his ultimate is what it boils down to. So let's jump into what his mechanical issues still seem to be, and we'll wrap this video up. So rounding things off and taking a look at the mechanical functions of Xin's kit, I gotta say the change to his WE combo is definitely nice. Landing your W and then going in for an engage or getting across walls faster in terms of getting around the map or getting to a jungle camp faster is really nice. One thing I will say is that his W is still really thin, so it's one of those weird situations where it's like, typically he engages first with his E, but because the skill shot on his W is so small, it makes it feel like the skill cap might be a little bit too high in terms of landing it, especially where his win rate is currently sitting. Now, that being said, the biggest problem it seems like Xin Zhao has, and what I found with all three build paths, is definitely sticking power. Now, granted, he's definitely a dive champion that people follow up on, but in ganks, the biggest issue I feel like I ran into was when he hits his WE combo. Obviously he's face rolling his Q in there as well to get the knockup. But as soon as those abilities are done and he's on cooldown, even early and into mid-game when he has one item built, enemies can pretty much just walk away from him. Again, in the Ahri game, I'll use an example. Like, I was 2 levels up above Ahri at one point, went in with my full combo, and she used her charm and just walk away. So I'm not exactly sure if I'm just playing Xin wrong. I like to think I wasn't, because he's a pretty relatively simple champion, but in that case, it feels as though he needs something to give him more sticking power. And I had a similar situation where I dove into a Heimerdinger in the AP game, I believe it was, and did my full combo, and he just flashed out and walked away. So in terms of something being anticlimactic, definitely the AP builds are, but also with his kit, it feels like he still has that problem of some kind of sticking power and not having it. So I'm not exactly sure what change I would suggest, because I'm not a Xin player. I never have been. So I'm kind of in the dark as to ideas as to what I could theoretically, suggest into the void of YouTube that might be able to benefit Xin Zhao, but it's got to be something in the range of sticking power, because the biggest thing it feels like Xin Zhao has is, despite the fact that he's a champion that auto-attacks you to death, it doesn't feel like he has any good means of keeping on you once his full combo is done. So anyway, guys, that is my 2 cents in my experiment for Xin Zhao today. Hope you guys enjoyed. As always, thank you very much for watching, and we will see each other again tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.